Welcome to the Travel Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Vandenberg, and on our show, I interview and connect with leaders across travel, hospitality, and tourism. We talk leadership in our industry, what has shaped them, the successes, failures, and everything in between. Today, I'm speaking with Lou Zameryka, former director of global accounts at Booking.com. Before we start, I want to let you know about the Travel Leader community. Every month, I'll be gathering a group of travel leaders to continue the conversation about leadership. This is a group for travel leaders looking to share, reflect, and grow their leadership competencies with the support of myself as a trained coach. Learn more at www.thetravelleadercoach.com. And welcome today, Lou. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak with you, Rachel, and I'm excited to join your great actually set of amazing episodes. So happy to join all those folks that came before me.
Thank you, and thanks for listening and giving that shout out. We ran into each other one day on LinkedIn. That's like the virtual office space, it seems like sometimes. And it's so exciting to meet, for me to meet new people like you and doing great things and leaving such a lasting legacy on the travel industry. Since then, I've listened to one of your podcasts, recordings with Dorothy Dowling from DEI Advisors. Really loved it and loved all the great stories. So looking forward to jumping in with you today.
Great. Well, yeah, I'll definitely share some news stories and share any that you
Cool.
found interesting in the last one.
Great. So to get us started, what has been the red thread throughout your travel career?
Okay, yeah. Well, I definitely had realized this red thread only about maybe 18 months ago, right? So I knew I had a proclivity for a certain scenario in my career. But then I was doing this core values exercise about 18 months ago because I don't know, I'm a nerd, I guess, and I like to always be learning. So I said, hey, let me try this. It was fantastic. I recommend it for anybody. If you do like a show notes thing, we could put a link to it. It was just fun. It was on the
Yeah.
internet. It really helped me understand even more about myself. But if you
Hmm.
don't mind me going back even before the travel career, I'll start where I realized what this red thread is. So,
Yeah.
mind if I do that?
Please.
All right.
Yeah.
This is kind of a good one because you like the stories, right? So,
Yeah.
I grew up in New York, Italian American and Polish American family, which means that you start working really early, right? So, ever since I was maybe 11 or so, I had a job. And my first job was working with my cousin Joey doing masonry work, right? So me and Joey and a couple other cousins would on the weekends or during the random summer breaks build people's front stoops, front driveways, everything, right? And that was the first job. Nothing there at first. We would go build. Then I realized as I was doing this exercise and reflecting back, my very next job, my real on the books job, was for a local grocery store. There was a family in town, and the girl that I was in class with, her family owned a chain of regional grocery stores in kind of the New York area, and a new one was opening right in our village. So at 16, I got a job as a cashier there at this new grocery store as the first team of cashiers. And then I started to realize as doing this exercise, building became a really common red thread in my career because even when I entered into hospitality, most of my first new jobs there were in new hotel openings, right? Just chaos and no structure. I seem to love the idea of going into either nothing or unstructured and putting it together, putting my own spin on it, building some structure, and getting to the potential of what that idea was, right? And it similarly kind of followed at Booking.com, right? I joined Booking.com 17 years ago, right after Priceline had purchased Booking.com and started to actually design an ambition to scale it around the world. So even there, while there was still already a Booking.com, there were about 100 people, and I was one of three people in all of the Americas that was hired, sitting in a bedroom in an apartment in Queens to try and build what now everybody knows as the 20,000, 25,000 employee mega Booking.com. So
Yeah.
that red thread was really building. And through this exercise, I realized, oh my gosh, it really was building because it's been my entire career, whether I realized it or not.
Wow. First of all, it's not nerdy to talk about values. Or I'm a nerd too, because
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things that you can do in your leadership development is dive deep and really uncover what those values are. I'm really glad that you brought that up today, because it's very empowering, and it must have been empowering for you too to kind of make that discovery in this process.
Yeah, it really was one of these things where so that core value exercise resulted in me creating a core value statement. And every day I write that statement in my journal, right? Just to kind of, and
Yeah.
it took a while to take from what the exercise came from into that statement that truly did resonate enough that every day when I write it, I really feel it. But to your point, like this is what you need to do, right? To really help develop your own leadership and thus get the faith of others to allow you to lead them. You got to put in the work, right? And you got to know yourself, and you got to know your capabilities and your limitations. So you're right; it's not nerdy. Maybe doing it on your random evenings rather
Yeah.
than as part of work or with an assigned coach is a little nerdy, but hey, it's really fun to do.
Right, right. So I think it's interesting to kind of go to follow this a little bit, and because I understand that you have since departed from Booking.com on
Yep.
very good terms and with
Yeah.
left a lot of great things behind you. So can you kind of go into how understanding that core value, what that's doing for you to help you shape this next phase in your career?
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, it was a very big decision for me, and of course not an easy one, right? 17 years at Booking.com. In fact, it's a very fresh one. I left about 5, 6 weeks ago. And again, this is a company that, thankfully, I've had the experience to build from a very, very small group of people, into what it is today, and really have meaningful experiences with my coworkers, right? Face big challenges, succeed at great opportunities. So it wasn't an easy decision, but
Hmm.
it was one that I had been thinking about for a long time. You might guess that that core values exercise actually helped me materialize even a year and a half ago that the thing that was rattling around in my head that I may need to go do was probably something I should go do. And, then I spoke about it with our management, and said, like, I think, next year, 2023 is going to be my last year. I have this thing I really want to do. And, of course, Booking, the senior leadership is fantastic at Booking, our CEO, and everybody. So they were like, you sure you don't want to like build something here? If you want to get that builder energy, just pick whatever you want. But ultimately, I knew that from my core values work, I needed to go back and try and build something actually for myself that would be an adventure because it wasn't going to be easy and that would help me service others, right? So, like, I really think about being in service to others and unlocking people's potential, the potential of them themselves, as well as the ideas that they have. That's my favorite thing. And that's what I get out of the core value statement. And I've always known about myself. It's like if I can help others exceed their own expectations for themselves and unleash their potential, I'm going to feel good about that. I'm going to put my energy into it. So that's what I'm actually leaving Booking to build a company that is focused on the human health span. So really, how do you live healthiest the longest? People are living longer nowadays. There's been people pursuing extending longevity. This is really about the healthy part of your life, right? Whether you live to 80 or 110, how do you live
Hmm.
healthy? How do you maximize your potential? So I said, you know what? I feel so good about the topic. I understand the values I have. It's time to go make a move.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you just also answered another one of our questions, which is what is the impact that you want to make? Whether it's in travel or in
Yeah.
anything you do. And what I'm hearing is, yeah, that unleashing the potential in others and really helping other people live their best life. That's pretty powerful.
Correct. I think if you leveled it up, that is exactly what my true kind of high level passion is, right? And you discover these things over courses of time, right? Because although I said, I left Booking a few weeks ago, and you maybe hear me say when I refer to Booking in this interview or in others or in conversation, I'll use a lot of "are" and "we," right? Because I haven't gotten used to yet saying
Right.
the "they." but I'll get there one day. But the thing
Yeah.
about it is the mission that we have at Booking.com really resonated with me. I was there when we created it, so of course it's nice that it resonated with me. There was a very small handful of us that were there during the creation, but the mission for Booking and Booking Holdings is to make it easier for people to experience the world, right? And like that was my goal in travel, right? I got into travel because I understood the power, the transformational power of travel on the individual and on the places they travel to and on the communities that
Hmm.
they interact with. And so even as, starting in hotels at 19 and knowing I wanted to work in hotels when I was a teenager, I knew it because of the power of travel. So again, like that mission resonated with me and it still does today. And in the travel world, if I could help people, whether they are at Booking or in the rest of the travel industry, make it easier for everybody to experience the world, I'll continue to do that while also working on that higher level, which is just helping people to unleash their potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the other theme that I'm picking up on is your focus really on people and how important that is to you. Those, what you did at booking.com and the mission of booking.com seems to live on in you and the way that you're going to move forward. That's really wonderful to hear.
Yeah, it's definitely I guess another thread is like, it's building, but honestly, if you don't have great people around to do it with and you're not like engaged in a community that you like to be in, it's going to be really hard to get at the energy and do the ch most challenging things
Sure.
in life.
Yeah, for sure. So, speaking of those people, how would the people around you describe you as a leader?
Oh yeah. So, uh I think it would be like kind of making a cocktail, right? So I'd be like one part pain in the butt, one part insightful. I can be also one part pretty ridiculous. A lot of people at Booking and in my career know me for these kind of crazy analogies I make when we're dealing with very hard business decisions or complicated projects. And, I always have one. And that's when I left Booking, people said, "Oh, we're really going to miss like the stories and the crazy analogies you have when we're facing something, right? Because it's just sometimes easier to understand it as either a story or some kind of comparable that's not so deep into the technical minutia. So I think that would be that. And then yeah, it would probably be garnished with my care about people, right? Like I'm willing to spend the time to really think about the individual and how to help them get the best of it. So hopefully that would be the garnish that attracted everybody's eye.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those kinds of stories and analogies or metaphors, they really help people see things from maybe a different perspective and get out of that box of thinking like, what's right in front of you. That can be a really powerful tool. And if you're able to really explain that with team members, it can really change thinking and broaden people's minds. That's a great skill that you have for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm a very curious guy, right? If you asked one of my core strengths, it's that curiosity. And I look for it in others or I look to inspire it in others. And that curiosity can often lead to creativity in the solutions you find, right? And so my real goal as a leader is to communicate clearly and empower people, give them some guardrails, right? But not
Hmm.
micromanage them and ensure that they can express their own curiosity to find solutions to the challenges we have or locate opportunities that we didn't know we had because they felt kind of the space to be curious in the way that they deliver.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, getting a little personal here, but
Yeah.
what makes your life and work meaningful?
Well, I think, like I said just a little bit before, the sense of love of travel I have is definitely one, right? So every day when I woke up in the past, really, I have 17 years of booking, but 25 years in travel already, so majority of my life, I knew that what I was getting up to do was going to have an impact on somebody, right? Usually you don't end up traveling from one place to the other without a reason, a set of kind of aspirations and hopes and dreams, right? And sometimes they're positive situations for why you're there, sometimes they're negative. But either way, you had this set of expectations. And the idea that like I could help somebody when they arrive there to just get what it was they needed to do done in a comfortable fashion and maybe exceed those expectations just meant a lot to me. I had great vacations growing up. They had great impact on me, the people that worked in the hotels. I think many people, if they were lucky enough, they've had these few vacations that stood out in life, right?
Mm.
And you think back to like the way a year of work is in the world, right? You have 2, 3 weeks vacation. Maybe nowadays people are getting 4 or 5, but classic 2, 3 weeks
Hmm.
vacation. It meant a lot where you went, what you did, and it left a lasting impression if it was really good. So that's probably the thing personally that drives me, the most. And then again, I just grew up in a great tight community with a good family, and that always helped me to think about, just how do you take care of yourself and how do you take care of others and how do you take care of the place that you're from?
Yeah, that brings me to something I'm curious about, which is what your thinking is, following that line of thinking about what the link is between travel and health.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things that where you can link this, right? So I mentioned earlier that I'm moving into this realm of health span. And again, health span is how you stay healthy longest. And why I gravitated towards health span of everything, right? Because it's not as common of a word as you would hear wellness or health or fitness, right? But I found through, again, the nerdy research, too many nights reading PDFs that I find, that the classic research of health span has these 5 pillars, right? And they are very specifically fitness, nutrition, sleep and recovery, stress management, and social connection and purpose. And the way the research goes is that if you can kind of touch something from all of those pillars, so you don't have to go very deep, but if you can touch something from each one pretty regularly in your life, that will keep you healthy, and it will maybe even help you live longer. And when you think about travel, well, there's a few of those pillars it hits, right? If we do our job right as hoteliers, we definitely help you take care of the sleep and recovery part, right? If we do our job right as hoteliers and travel industry professionals, we can not only keep the stress down from traveling, but allow
Hmm.
you to release some stress, right? When you're out
Right.
and about and experiencing new places and new things. And of course, social connection and purpose. If you are in travel, I think in the past 10 years, you've seen a real surge of people that are able to go on trips where they give back to communities or they make sustainable choices. So again, these ideas of social connection and purpose are also alive in travel. So to me, the idea that health and wellness has a travel component is really, I see it weaved in everywhere, even from habit
Yeah.
forming, right? So if you look at nutrition and fitness, although it's kind of not considered the norm, or the normal thing to understand, when you have an interruption of your normal routine is one of the best times to form a new habit. So even the idea of someone traveling from one place to the other, if we do our jobs right, we can help them get on track rather than off track with certain habits in life. So I see a lot of opportunity there, as you could tell.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It reminds me too of the documentary that's on Netflix right now, Blue Zones.
Yep.
I haven't watched it fully yet, but I've heard a lot about it, and some of the stuff I think that comes out that I've heard in the show is about that link to purpose and social connection, but also to food choices, exercise. So I love that term. I've never heard, you said it's called health span
Health
is kind
span.
of,
So, yeah, exactly. So, longevity is made up of lifespan and health span. So, how long you live is lifespan. How healthy you are throughout that period is your health span. And you're right. That live to 100 in the blue zone, that is health span. As well as earlier in the year, or late last year, Disney had a show called Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, Thor. That is all about health span, and that's what that show is. But they don't use that name yet, and it's just starting to become a little bit more and more known. But those are all the pillars of health span in both of those examples.
yeah, great, great. So switching gears a little bit, there's all we're always presented with challenges in our life and, things that we think maybe we're not capable of doing or achieving. When is a time that you have underestimated yourself?
Yeah. So uh, I appear really confident. But man, I underestimate myself all the time. it's okay to do as well, right? So there are certain scenarios where you've seen it before, you know it before, and you're like, okay, I got this, right? But if you really want to grow and learn and challenge yourself and make a contribution, you're probably going to put yourself into way more situations where you underestimate yourself. I've done it many, many times. At Booking, I led, not only did I build up a lot of our market teams, but I led our global accounts team, right? So I would work with the largest hotel franchise systems and chains in the world. And when I started, I was in my mid 20s. And, you know, you put Marriott or or Hilton or a company like that really on a pedestal when you come into the hotel industry, right? And so when you go to Marriott's headquarters to have a headquarter meeting with people that are icons, right? Especially early days at Marriott, like you worked your way up through the kind of hotel systems and eventually made it to kind of headquarters. So
Yeah.
you could picture like a 26, 27-year-old person going in, meeting with people that are so much more experienced and from an iconic brand. So every time I was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be in here. Like, what are you doing in here? But you know, that's part of that growth mindset, right? Like
Yes.
you need to put in the effort. That's first of all. I remind myself all the time, like, I praise the effort, not the outcome all the time. And for me, if you're not putting yourself in the position where you underestimate yourself, you're not putting yourself in a position to grow and learn. And the thing I always remind myself is more times than not, the other people who maybe are in that scenario with you, they either don't want to be you, so they feel some compassion for you, right? Or they want you to succeed, so they put that compassion towards you. There's like, it's like when you speak on stage, people say, oh, you get stage fright. There's 1,000 people. And, it reminds me sometimes I would say to myself, well, the person who put on that event, they must have known that I could do this, right? Because they wouldn't have risked themselves putting me on here. So they know I do this. So I guess I can do this. So
Sure.
I'll just go do this. And I would imagine the audience wants to see me do well. So they also want me to do this. And that's good enough vibes for me to kind of proceed.
Yeah. So it seems like one of the ways that you've ever overcome that is to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the other person and see yourself through their eyes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really
that's a great.
perspective taking is critical in, whether you're problem solving, whether you're working with people, but if you can take the perspectives of others or allow yourself to try on a new perspective, you'll find yourself succeeding, and it will take things that are challenging and maybe make them a little less challenging for yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that story reminds me of is that we don't, unless you're putting yourself in uncomfortable positions and going, or as they say, going out of your comfort zone, you're not growing. And who wants to stay, static? I think many people and many leaders, they want to continue to grow their abilities. So you're ultimately going to be in some uncomfortable situations
Yeah,
when you do that.
if I could share kind of back to my childhood where I think I was lucky enough to start getting a mental model for this. Um, when I was younger, not sure what started it or why, but I read a lot of biographies. Even still to this day, I read a lot of biographies. But in my formative like teen years, what I think these biographies really showed me, and I started to realize it, was the idea of what would become that growth mindset, right? That it's about the
Hmm.
effort, and that there really aren't many people that we consider successful that when you look back, uh, they had some kind of natural ability, right? There was no natural
Right.
ability in most of them. They might have been inclined to be good at something, but in general, you read these biographies, and the person that we all have up on that pedestal now went through so many things, right? So many
Yeah.
obstacles, put in so much effort, and additionally found little ways for themselves to keep themselves on track, right? So tips, gimmicks, whatever. So I was always open to that. I was always open to saying, like, I think most people face a challenge at some point that they learn from. And sometimes while facing the challenge, they use tools, tips, or tricks that most people would dismiss. But it's actually what makes those other folks successful when they put in the effort. You hear about people with their routines or their post-it notes here or whatever there.
Right.
It's not easy to be one of those folks that is the most successful that people write a biography about you. So there's
Right.
a lot of tools that they use and a lot of challenges they overcome. But I read so many when I was a kid that it helped me really understand that. Like, there is no such thing as just some people are great at everything or something and other people are not. It's some people have some kind of inclination and then they work really hard and then they fail and then they figure out ways to maybe not fail as much, but they keep going.
Right. And you don't start out life as CEO or president.
Yeah.
We all start in the same way. And we're all on that journey to improve and achieve. So in theory, I mean, obviously there are a lot of obstacles in life that can hold back some more than others. But essentially, we're all starting somewhere along the same place, and we have the ability to shape that as we grow and learn,
Yeah.
for
And it's not
sure.
just we have the ability to shape, right? I've gotten lucky because there's been fantastic people around me, leaders that, were basically the tribe of mentors for me. Still to
Hmm.
this day, I have a series of mentors about different aspects of my life. And thankfully, so many good people are actually out there willing to help if you ask them, because they want to share what they've learned too. And so
Hmm.
I mean, I'm really grateful. You mentioned Dorothy and the interview I did with her, but Dorothy Dowling has been like somebody that I could count on for asking questions for, over 10 years now. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of those people. So I think if people are out there listening, and feel like they don't have all the answers, uh, that's perfectly fine because I'm telling you, if you go ask some other people to just give you some help or assistance, they're going to be happy to.
Yeah, that's a really important point you bring up because I don't think anybody gets to where they are on their own.
No.
It takes one of the themes that's come up in these discussions that I've had with leaders is kind of related to the self-doubt and underestimation as well. It took someone else identifying in them and acknowledging their strengths and their possibilities for them to take a new leadership role, for example. Um, so those kinds of people that are further along in the journey or higher up in the hierarchy, they have a really important role for mentoring and sponsorship. If there's a leader out there listening who thinks, well, I don't really have a lot of mentors or I haven't really formed those relationships, do you have any, tips or strategies that people could use to build those relationships?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways I would look at it in the building phase, right? First of all, I'm a pretty outgoing guy, as you can tell, so I never hesitate to reach out to people. But I would say a couple of things to consider. So within yourself, you have to believe and understand that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a superpower, right? So if you can put yourself in a vulnerable situation or admit to that vulnerability, you can then start to take the steps yourself and with others to develop a strength, right, in an area where you feel weak. So I would just say acknowledging to yourself that it's perfectly fine to begin that outreach and to explain to people that you're not doing well at something or you need some help with something. So vulnerability is a superpower. That's step one. Step two is the willingness to be okay getting the either silence or rejection as you reach out, right? Because the other people on the other side are just human.
Right.
Odds are they're not on the other side thinking, I don't want to help this jerk. Like they're just maybe
Hmm.
busy, maybe whatever. We're all human, right? So things will slip through the cracks. They're trying to fight their own prioritization wars in their life. So I would say don't consider that if you're asking some folks for help and them not getting back to you, that they have something against you. It's not there. But the way to improve the odds of that, and really the right way to do it, in terms of getting support and really providing a kind of a circle of value, is to also be open to giving before you receive, right? So, or as you receive, right? And say, hey, how can I be useful to something you're doing
100%.
while you help me with something I'm doing, right? And I think looking at it as a two-way street like that, that's the thing probably I'm most known at in the industry and in booking is my network of people, the relationships that I have, and the sense of partnership I bring to whatever it is I do. Because, even as the person who is our lead negotiator, did not see those negotiations ever as a zero-sum game. I saw it as an opportunity to kind of reset our partnerships to ensure that we're trading the variables that matter both to us in a way that we're both going to be at best very happy with the next few years of our relationship. At worst, we're going to feel okay enough that we're doing business together, right? But I never
Yeah.
should it feel like someone won or someone lost. So I would say, just as you build those relationships, it's know that it's okay to be vulnerable. Know that people are just people. They're going to try and help. Sometimes they're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're not going to hear back from them. And then be giving of yourself in order to receive.
That is so critical. I mean, all of those points are critical, but that last one, I think that was coming up for me in my experiences in having mentors or colleagues who have really taught me a lot in through our relationships. I think there's a misconception that mentorship is about asking someone to, to give you something and to help you with something. But what you've 100% correctly pointed out that it's a two-way relationship. And the way to develop that relationship is to raise your hand and say, how can I help? How can I help you? Or how can I help this initiative? This is what I have to offer. And it's through that process and that relationship that you will come into situations where mentorship relationships can evolve and grow.
Yeah, again, there's nothing wrong with like good outcomes coming from people partnering together, right? Commercial outcomes or anything. I think I mentioned on DEI, but I became president of HSMAI New York, the largest chapter, as the youngest president ever, and then went on to the Americas board. And it started with me I happened to be at events extra early, and I would help Kathy Stapleton set up name tags, right? Because she needed help. I wanted to meet people, and I was like, well, here's a great way I can help, right? So I'll just set up name tags. And then it was like, wow, that guy is willing to do the name tags. Maybe would you
Yeah.
do this? Would you sell some raffle tickets? Would you do whatever? So, be giving of yourself, and you'll get it back a lot, like tenfold in return.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. What event has shaped you as a leader?
Yeah, I think the key thing, and it's really timely because on Monday, actually, the public schools here in New York were off. So on Monday, my high school had an open house for any alumni that wanted to bring their seventh or eighth grade sons. So I went to a private all boys Catholic school on Long Island, actually right near where I live now and grew up. And the elements of that school were all about taking you from kind of the boy that came out to being a Chaminade man, right? The school is named Chaminade. And it was all about being in service to others and strength and unity, which is our motto. And I see it reflected back to me in like the hundreds of Chaminade men that are still in my life, right? They're successful business people, they're local community leaders, and that sense that they instilled in us, it was also a lot of discipline, right? How time management, rigor, things of that nature, how to make the right decisions. But it was really about this sense of like a Chaminade man, stands up for what's right, is in service to others. There's strength and unity. I mean, so that 4 years, although it was tough, definitely left probably the most lasting impression on who I choose to be now. And like I
Hmm.
said, it's great because there's a bunch of other men that I know that have went through that because about 400 guys graduate every year, and you can see the values back in them. So it's good to kind of notice that in the world.
Yeah. That idea of, I don't know, if I think they're called cardinal virtues. I think that's something that often gets lost in our development. And it's something a little different than values. How do you think that people can develop those kinds of virtues? I mean, one of them you mentioned was around doing what is right. Are there some others that have really shaped you along the way?
Well, I think in terms of how you develop them, right? I think when people even hear that I went to a like a Catholic school, they already start thinking about the religion aspect of it, right? I would consider my wife's a yogi. I would consider myself spiritual more than religious, but I would consider myself a student of understanding what's, right and wrong in the world and how to be helpful and useful through whatever frame people are looking at it, right? So I think that the first element of it is to be curious and be thoughtful about yourself and about the things you're doing, right? And then go out there in the world and look at, where you see either role models or opportunity for information that's going to put you on the right course and practice it and test it. It's developing any kind of either character trait or skill is not easy. I also am an amateur competitive runner, so I am very fast. And people are like, "Wow, you are very fast." And they're like, "What is it? Like what workout do you do or whatever?" I'm like, there are key workouts. There's all this type of things that I may do that get me a bit of an edge, but that nothing beats 300 days a week waking up at 5 a.m. and going out and putting in the miles, right? And so that's like
Right.
anything, whether it's the virtues or whatever you're developing, you have to find your reason why. Like, why are you
Hmm.
connected with what you're about to do or try and learn or try and instill in yourself? Are you willing to do the work? And
Yeah.
then are you willing to learn from your failures? And then how do you find other role models? Like I mentioned in the shaman thing, I get I get it reinforced not through the words of the school or a newsletter, but through the interactions I have with the other folks that came from that school with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like too that it's about putting yourself in experiences where that you can learn from and test those disciplines and virtues and values, all of those things. You're not gonna learn and grow from anything when you're just sitting at home doing the same thing every day. So really
Yeah.
pushing yourself into those kinds of experiences.
And even in business, like Booking.com was known for our test and learn culture, right? Of A/B testing, 1,000 versions of the site live every day and everything. But we were always testing and learning, right? Not just with our website, but with everything we were doing, because most of us had no experience in trying to do what we were trying to do. So we'd have to be open with each other and say, hey, what do we think? Who has a good idea? Okay, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Anybody want to build on that? Anybody have different ideas? And then eventually we would get to a point where we said, all right, idea number one is pretty good. Let's try it and see what happens, right? We'll watch the data, we'll see what happens. Be confident in implementing it, but hold it loosely, right? Because we may see something that we didn't expect and we may need to ditch it. And that'll be okay if we go to number two. It doesn't mean that number one was bad. We all thought it was good. But I think that, like you said, if you're willing to test and learn in your own life and be confident and be decisive, but always hold some of this stuff a little bit loosely so you can be curious about what other perspectives or options are out there.
Yeah.
I would say that's the key element for growth in business and growth in personal
Yeah,
development too.
for sure. So you are going through yourself a big transition in life and work, and I think the world is also going through a lot of transitions right now with technology and a lot more on the plate, the proverbial plate, so to speak. What do you think are the most important leadership competencies that are needed in this kind of transformation and change?
Yeah, so I think empathy is a really clear one, right? So as a leader, you may have developed a strength in dealing with volatility, uncertainty, chaos, ambiguity, because you kind of came up towards a leadership rank probably by having some of those experiences in life. But that doesn't mean that everybody you lead has. So, and that could be, volatility at work, volatility at home, volatility at some macro level that's putting a stressor on them. So I think empathy is key, right? Like make
Yeah.
sure you understand, the shoes of those other folks. Um, then I would say, I mentioned kind of curiosity. When I look at, the tools that are being created now, like artificial intelligence, which everybody's talking about, if getting information and synthesizing information into a finished product and also completing tasks is going to become much more highly automated and capable, I think the ability to have creative and curious insights, as well as take perspectives that are unique, is going to be what differentiates people from just using the tooling and getting to where the tooling does very efficiently and sometimes even impactfully versus actually being able to compete in the area you're trying to compete in, right? Or to grow in the area you're trying to grow in. So I think I would not underestimate this idea of curiosity and creativity, because if the world is going to be served up a little bit more standardized and a little bit more fast and robotic, if you will, where you're going to make the difference is actually taking that curious perspective that couldn't yet be taken because it had not been taken, right? So AI learns on
Hmm.
models, and I guess it'll eventually get pretty good to be predictive. But if you are unpredictable in a way that has some foresight because of your curiosity and your creativity, you will stay valuable, and your company and your organization, or any of your people will start to thrive. So I think I
Yeah.
would go with empathy and curiosity as key elements right now.
Yeah, I totally ascribe to that. I mean, just in this simple experience that I've had in, for example, using AI tools like ChatGPT, I've actually found that through that process of, experimenting and using them, that it's actually allowed me to be more creative. Because I'm not just taking the information for what it is, it's more like it's an input to a much larger output, an outcome of what I want to create. And even like when you're making prompts for a tool like that, that skill of creativity and curiosity, those skills are absolutely critical.
Yep,
It's like the saying garbage in, garbage out. If, right?
100%. If you're not playing with prompts right now, you're missing out on a really great opportunity to train yourself in how you communicate, how you
Yeah.
write, especially because it's obviously a lot of written prompts, and how you articulate, concepts, right? Because you're right. I mean, the design of your prompt, whether you're creating imagery or creating, further information out in text-based form, it's like an exercise in that. So even if you say, "Hey, I don't know what I'm going to use AI for," the like play around with just your ability to describe to something very intelligent that will react to what you describe very literally, really, how well you can do that. Because I mean, if you're going to be a leader, right? A lot of your job is communication. If you're
Yeah.
at the top, like the true leader of either a team, a department, or a company, you are trying to communicate the vision as well as the strategy and ensure that people can then take that strategy and clearly define what actions they're going to take, that their actions are in service of that strategy, and bring you back what you were hoping to get, right? Which is either the objectives or the metrics. But if you can't communicate that clearly,
Right.
that's on you as the leader, because those people are
Hmm.
going to think that they're doing the thing you told them to do. And if you start to observe they're not, trust me, go back and think about your communication, because if your
Yeah.
people are great people, but they're not delivering exactly what you had in mind, they don't know what you had in mind then.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a great analogy for sure.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of our session today, but before we close it out, a little bit of a philosophical question. How do you want to be remembered?
Um, I mean, I guess if you haven't guessed by now through some of my answers, honestly, I just want to be considered useful. Like, I want people to go like, hey, like Lou was always willing to help. He, showed up and made this thing easier for me or helped me to understand how to go accomplish something. So honestly, like there could be much more grandiose ways, right? Like I'd love to leave something behind that exists for 150 years. It could be a bar,
Hmm.
it could be a hotel, who knows what it could be. But in all honesty, if people look back and say like, hey, what he did during the time that he existed was extremely useful, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. And I think I'm remembering a story from your interview with Dorothy about there was someone from I think Orbits or something
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
and the hugging story. Could you tell that one really quick?
Yeah, in fact, I was just with an early Orbitz employee at a dinner 2 nights ago, and I was talking about this gentleman that I saw hugging a hotelier. So, yeah, Marcus Boker was one of the original account managers in the Northeast for Orbitz. And when I was just getting started at Booking, I was responsible for, the Northeastern cities and developing our hotel relationships. And I was sitting in a Manhattan hotel and waiting my turn to meet with either the director of sales or the GM. I don't really recall back then, but and as I'm sitting there with my briefcase and my bookings.nl folders and stuff, the next meeting gets out. And the hotels oftentimes at the front office, like behind the desk or something. I see someone come out and big hug, right? Like this gentleman and the other person are like embraced in a big hug, like they were old friends and they just left a day out at the park or at the bar or something. And I was like, whoa, okay. I see that this guy has an Orbitz, like a messenger bag. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm going to win and anybody's going to know who Booking.com is, especially in this crowded marketplace with so many OTAs, I need to get hugs like that guy. Forget about it. Like,
Right.
forget measuring like how many contracts are coming in. That's a short-term thing. How many, like we can always tweak those metrics. But getting hugged like that goes a long, long way, right, in your business and builds a foundation. And so I just kept thinking, like, how am I going to get these people to hug me? And
Yeah.
Marcus became like a super dear friend of myself and my wife, and I got tons of the hugs from him too. And that was just the way to think about it, right? Like if I could build my business on hugs, it's on a really good foundation, and from there we can go anywhere, right?
Right. And I think that's symbolic. And I'm sure you've earned a lot of hugs,
Yeah, get some good
just
hugs. I like it.
with what, you've told about yourself and your care for people and empathy and the human aspect of leadership. So I'm sure that's come to fruition for you, and it speaks to who you are, beyond just the doing and what you have created to be useful. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out because I
Yeah,
thought that
thank you.
was a great thing that you brought up. So I am, yeah, super thankful. Is there for you being here today? Is there anything else you would like to tell our audience?
No, I just think, again, I still have the passion for travel. I thank everybody in the travel and hospitality industry for the work that they do. I know it's not always easy, but you're definitely making the world a better place. And I guess if anybody wants to talk about either travel and where it hits health and wellness, I'm happy to do so. If anybody wants to just talk about health span, I'm also happy to meet up and do so. So, but otherwise, you'll see me out there still. I left travel, but I'm going to be hanging around. It's a passion.
Awesome.
It'll never leave me. A lot of us don't know why we got into hotels or hospitality, why we stay, and neither do I. So I'll be still sticking around.
And we're all drawn back to it in one way or another.
Yeah, I'm not under any illusion that I'm leaving it, right? Like, because I've
Right.
seen everybody come back regardless. So I'm not even going to say I'm leaving.
Right. Yeah. So be sure to reach out to Lou on LinkedIn. He's a great partner to have in this industry. Thank you so much, Lou, for joining me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Until
Thank
next
you.
time, I'm Rachel Vandenberg, and this is the Travel Leader Podcast.